a couple points I'll ask for some input, but you know, would love to see you if you're able to and comfortable with that, having your camera on, but I'm not going to make too big of a deal of it either way. It is your preference, of course. I am John Rosenfield. I'm an associate director with Career Services, and so I oversee the team that deals with career advising and education. So all things career development is what we do. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jessica.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Alfie, and I'm the administrative coordinator at the graduate school, and I focus primarily on professional development programming, and we're happy to see such a great turnout today. So welcome, everyone.
Right. And so as you all have seen on the invite, on the posting and handshake, the topic that we are hoping to address today is really resume and cover letter crafting, but specifically in the context of moving from being used to CVs or thinking of the world in a CV oriented way when we're in pursuing advanced degrees, and that's the preferred method of conveying our professional image. But really taking that and translating that into a resume and cover letter for use in the non-academic world, where the CV is not typically the preferred method of conveying oneself. So that's going to be our focus for today. There should be at least a minute or two at the end for some questions. I will ask along the way if people have thoughts or questions. But I also want to let you all know this is not I'm not a terribly formal presenter. So if you feel like you need to get my attention and there's a question, a hot topic on your mind, you can use the chat box. You can do the hand raise thing. So yeah, let's make sure that we address burning questions that you may have. But having said that, I'm going to get my shared screen going. And we can jump into the presentation itself. Hang on, I'm just going to get my screens reoriented so that it's the way I want to see it. Okay. All right. So again, we're really going to be talking about best practices for resume and cover letter. Let's see. Best practices for resume and cover letter, and then again, we're particularly thinking about that moving from CV to resume. All right, I'm gonna get things going. We'll jump into it. By going right to that question, what are some of the basic differences? And here are some of the basic differences. And so one is just that the CV is generally intended for to be used in an academic setting. I have a question that we're looking at the Prezi screen. So is it not moving? Like if I change positions?
Yeah, we can only see the dashboard, so we just see the different.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, that's weird. Okay, hang on a second. I'm gonna reorient my shared screen because maybe I moved it, and maybe that's the thing it didn't like that I moved it. How about now? Seeing resume and cover letter. I'm sorry, resume versus CV.
Yes, we can see that.
Awesome. Thank you for letting me know. That would have been so annoying to have done the whole thing and it's not moving. All right. So yeah. So CV, this is what you've been asked for in a graduate, in an academic setting, in a setting where you're talking about research positions or pursuing advanced degrees. Pretty much almost everything else, except for maybe a few research-oriented positions out in the rest of the world, are going to be asking for a resume. So when we're talking about working in an industry, we're talking about most settings outside of the academy. A resume is what they're going to be looking for. And so whereas the CV has a very academic focus in terms of communicating what your engagement has been and the volume of that engagement and the timing of that engagement, the focus on the resume is really about your experience. And we say work/experience there. So, right, so we're actually going to take a pretty wide angle view of what might constitute experience. Paid employment plus, we might say. But the resume is really about a lot more, can/should be a lot more than the academic pursuit. Whereas CVs can just stretch on into the infinite, towards the infinite. A resume really should be, say, in the neighborhood of 1 to 2 pages. And certainly for folks who are pursuing advanced degrees or have some years of professional experience, being on that second page or being up to that second page is really fine. It used to be just an absolute rule that resumes should never be longer than 1 page. But today, in this day and age, if you've got more training, more education, more experience, it can be okay to be looking at 1 to 2 pages. Okay, but really, if we're beyond that, we're kind of pressing the issue of what most people are expecting to see as hiring managers, and what they may be willing to really sift through with intention and focus. So again, 1 to 2. All right. So another big difference, and I think this is maybe the piece that I want people to come away with most profoundly today, or one of the main points, is this. Whereas a CV may be very comprehensive in terms of your academic engagement and your disciplinary pursuits, very comprehensive, but less descriptive of what each of those things have been in terms of the doing parts. It's really a long list, right? I mean, sometimes you need to have the right kind of citation and you need to have the right kind of formatting. It's just a very big timeline for the most part, though. The resume is a timeline of experiences, but also for a resume to be particularly useful to you as a tool for getting positions, it should also be a demonstration of your capabilities. And those can be transferable as well as applied capabilities, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. So those are the core differences, and again, I'm going to hit that last piece repeatedly throughout, but I'm going to keep it moving for now. So a lot of times the sort of folk wisdom that we've inherited about resumes, that they're about getting noticed, standing out from the rest, as our little graphic here says. But I'm going to boil it down to maybe a different idea, which is this: the whole point of the resume is to get an interview. It's not necessarily an artifact you're going to exchange for a job or for an internship. Hopefully, it demonstrates enough about your capabilities that somebody is interested in talking to you more. That's really the long and short of what this document is intended to do. And so we're gonna spend the rest of the time really breaking down how we make that most useful. All right. So there's this idea that we have about standing out, and people to oftentimes really come in to see our team, and they're very concerned about this. They're like, I've been told I need to stand out. I need to be unique. How do I do it? Should I have a crazy font or put my picture on the thing? And we say, no, don't do that. We want to stand out for the right reasons, not the wrong reasons. So the right reasons would be that you are demonstrating transferable and specific capabilities or skills. That the information is organized in a clear way, and it is easy for the reader to identify what is relevant to them quickly and simply. Also that you are demonstrating something about the scale and complexity, and of course the duration of the experiences that you've had in the past. So those are the things that are going to help you stand out for the right reasons if you do them effectively and clearly. The things that really don't help, even though sometimes people imagine that they will, are some kind of bold template or formatting. Again, having images or some other kind of irrelevant information, even icons or infographics. I know that those have had their moments on Canva or on other platforms. I don't think it's particularly helpful. Another piece that we want to be mindful of is overemphasizing details, like really getting bogged down in the worrying about it, demonstrating a certain kind of timeline, or saying things like, I was full-time and this was part-time, or describing like, this is what my research lab was trying to uncover. That's not always the most important piece. We really want to be concentrating on the capabilities that you're able to demonstrate because of the work that you were doing. And again, I'll say more about that as we move through. All right. So another way just to kind of break this down, and for if there are any humanities folks among us, this may feel more familiar. When we're first learning how to do a resume, or we're introduced to the idea of resume, maybe it looks like a timeline of involvement. And like I said, we're adding more than just a description of duties. So sometimes we're told, kind of copy and paste your job description that you had before. And so you have this description of duties. But I'm going to go ahead and say, let's borrow from writing, from the practice of writing, right? That we show, we don't tell, to be truly effective in written communication. And so we're trying to use this document to show, to demonstrate the capabilities that we have on offer to a potential employer or internship site. So we want to help the reader to see, to have a visceral understanding of what we are capable of, not just what we've done, or a place that we've spent time for a semester or two. So we want to remember that the reader is the person who's most important in this document when we're preparing this document, and that person, the reader, most of the time, does not share your experiences and memories. They're not you. They're not your mom. They're not your a mentor. They're someone else most of the time. So this is particularly important when we're thinking about moving from CVs to resumes, I believe, because again, a lot of the work in creating a CV is just about getting all of this stuff, jammed into the correct formatting. And a lot of the skill sets, a lot of the capabilities that go into academic work, into academic labor, are just kind of assumed in that format. And we really do ourselves a disservice on the resume if we don't go ahead and demonstrate, kind of pull apart and demonstrate what some of those capabilities are. And so again, I'll go into greater detail as we move through. All right, so I'm just going to do a few words quickly, as quickly as I ever do, about best practices in terms of layout and formatting. Y'all are grad students. There are places to see this online. I don't want to get way into it, but there are some rules that are important to follow because they serve the purpose of making the information clear and legible and easy to navigate for the reader. So some of the things that you just have to do, because this is pretty much what people expect and want to see. So like I said before, I've upgraded, so 1 to 2 pages. Reverse chronological order within each section. So within each section. So within education, your current program should be the first thing that's listed, and then we move backwards in time. Same with within all of your other sections. That's how it should be organized. Present tense for your verbs can be used for ongoing experiences. And again, that's present, like simple, like assess, not assessing. Okay, it's just assess. Past tense can be used for present experiences if you want, but it should be used consistently in that case, right? All of the bullet points should be consistent in whatever tense you're using. For experiences that have concluded, you should be using past tense verbs. Okay. So again, I don't want to go way deep on this super logistical stuff. It's all available in the resume guide, which is available on Career Services website. And there will be a link for that you can see later as well. And I can share this out to participants, a link to the Prezi. So again, like I was saying a minute ago, the formatting should help the reader navigate the page and understand the information as quickly and easily as possible. This day and age, you can use the narrow setting on Word for the margins, the 0.5 all the way around. It's totally fine. For font, I would say 10 to 12 point. For the main text and the headers, there's really no reason to go larger than that, and I would avoid going smaller than that just for legibility reasons, depending on your reader's age and eyesight. You know, as I mentioned earlier, wild templates or even just what we might think of as interesting templates, I don't think are particularly helpful. A lot of times they can be scanned incorrectly by applicant tracking systems. They can be harder for you to edit when you want to go back and change things on the fly. So just open up a Word or a Google Doc, you know, document, and left justify everything except maybe your name at the top. That could be centered. And just use those basic formatting tools to help break up the page and direct the reader's eye. So caps, bold, italics, underline, and bullet points, not paragraphs. And so again, that may be something that feels a little different than how we might summarize information in places on a CV. I highly recommend that you use bullet points, not sentences or paragraphs. There's plenty of literature on, you know, that cognitively and neurologically, when a human being looks at a block of text, like a paragraph, you know, attention just starts to wander. We just start thinking about what's for lunch. So you know, using the bullet points is going to help keep the eye moving, keep the person focused on your capabilities, and that's what we want. All right. So just to kind of put the best practices into a context, I'm going to fade in here some of our actual resume guides, so you see what the basic outline looks like. Incredibly boring, yes. Not cool like the Canva templates, but incredibly easy to navigate, and that's the important thing. So again, I'm going to mention over here, we want to be using format and layout strategically. We want to be demonstrating skills, both applied and transferable, and I'm going to break that down a bit. We want to be descriptive, so quantifying and qualifying, saying something about scale and complexity of our experiences. Use concise language, and so this is really a different sort of style than other writing that you might do. It's not creative writing, it's not personal writing, it's not even really like academic writing. I think the closest analogy that I can think of is maybe like journalistic writing, particularly a headline or a photo caption. That's kind of the style that we're talking about here. So using language in a very concise fashion, and I'll talk more about how we achieve that. And also thinking about keywords. Now, I don't want to, you know, some career people are like to be very shocking about keywords and saying if you don't do the keywords, you won't get scanned correctly or this or that. There is some truth that a lot of applicant tracking systems now do scan for keywords. I don't think we should get paralyzed by worrying about it. What we can do is be mindful of, particularly if we're looking at a job description, what are the verbs, what are the terminology that's being used by the employer? Are there places where we can map that onto how we've described our experiences and our capabilities, so that we are using similar terminology that's recognizable to human or machine, whoever happens to look at this first, but they're going to see it in terms of the language that they've used, and that's going to give you a leg up in the process. So now I'm going to slide back over just to kind of, again, show what this looks like in context. Another piece that I think can be really useful to think about when we do a CV, we kind of have the standard rote subsections that it's broken up into. And to an extent, that's true on a resume, right? So we have an education section, we may have an experience section, we may have a volunteer section, we may have a skills section. However, there is some flexibility with how we use those sections, what we choose to call them, which is frankly up to us. The whole point is to set the reader's expectations in a way that helps them understand what they're going to see, or draws their eye to something relevant. And then we need to deliver on that expectation that we have set. So that's why, as you see in this example, there are these kind of slashies, some different alternatives that you can use. So sometimes we might want to highlight certain kinds of experience altogether and not have it be broken up into different, work experience, internship experience, teaching experience. So some easy ways to do that, again, thinking about the way that you're setting the reader's expectations, is by changing the title of a section. And so you might, one of the easiest ways to do this is to call a section relevant experience. So you may have a relevant experience and an additional experience section, in which case you're capturing a bunch of transferable skills in that additional experience, but you're saying to the reader, hey, here's the stuff that I have selected that I think is going to be most interesting to you, and I'm putting it first. Within each of those sections, again, whatever you're putting in there needs to be in reverse chronological order. But this is some flexibility and some strategic opportunities that we have in terms of how we set up the page to help direct the reader's experience and construct a certain narrative that we want to portray. All right, so I want to pause really quick because I feel like I've been gabbing for a minute here. Questions, concerns about structure and layout before I move on to the juicy content. All right, I'm going to keep it popping then. Excellent. All right, so we'll talk about content. So you may have noticed on that sample, you may say, well, John, there's no objective on there. And you're right, there wasn't an objective statement on the resume. Objective statements in this day and age, at least as called objective statements, are largely obsolete. And so what is traditionally thought of as an objective statement is this kind of generic, like, I would like to use my skills to serve your organization, this kind of thing. It doesn't really help the reader interpret your information in any different way. So we say that type of statement is largely obsolete. What is a bit more contemporary and is what some folks will call a profile or a summary statement. And again, this is optional, particularly if you're submitting a cover letter. You really don't need one because the cover letter, it kind of is doing this work. But basically, this newer style is something that draws a more direct line from your current status, remarking on few of the skills or capabilities that you're bringing to the table, and then that thing that you're pursuing. So some examples could be master's candidate with mentorship and program management experience seeks student services leadership role. So again, we're saying something about a current status, master's candidate, something about some skills and capabilities that we bring to the table, the mentorship and the program management. And then, oh, magically, the thing that we're seeking is it's pretty much the job title. So another example could be doctoral candidate with research and training experience seeks data analyst role, something along those lines, right? So it is a quick, to the point statement. I would not spend more than really 2 lines of text on something like that if you are going to include it on the resume. Again, otherwise you're just, your reader's eyes are glazing over before they've even gotten to the main part of the document. Okay. All right. So much for introductory statements. Let's get into the heart of the thing. These bullet points that you are using to demonstrate your capabilities and to talk about your experiences. So I mentioned before, highly advocate using the bullet points, not even going to talk about trying to use the sentence or full sentences or paragraphs. These are phrases, they are not full sentences. Again, thinking headline, thinking photo caption. They begin with a verb. And so this one refers to, yes, what you did. Verbs describe action, of course. But again, we want to be thinking about what is the capability that we're trying to demonstrate when we select that verb. I'll go into greater detail about this in a few minutes. But again, you can be thinking about borrowing from the job description where it fits and where you feel like you can map onto experiences that you've had. So we want to be choosy about the verb. We want to be thinking about it in a way that demonstrates a capability, not just describes like a physical activity. Okay. And then the rest of the phrase should demonstrate why the action was important in the context that you are operating in, right? So we start with the verb, it says what we did, and then why was it useful? Why is it helpful? Why was it important? And here's the real key. And again, where I think a lot of times people moving from a CV to a resume may sell themselves short because up until that point, a lot of the skill sets and a lot of the capabilities that go into academic work may just sort of be assumed under the radar on a CV. So we're going to break this down a little bit, what transferable skills are. This is not science, but when we talk about in our office and our team, when we talk about transferable skills, the buckets that we break this up into typically are communication, problem solving, time management, leadership, and organization. Now, if you just think about those terms and what they might encompass, your mind already might be thinking about all kinds of aspects of your instructional work, your research work, just your own academic work at the graduate level, as well as all kinds of job experiences that you may have had, internships in the past, volunteer stuff that you have done, campus organizations, student organizations that you have been a part of. All of these things, I'm not a betting person, but I'm willing to lay down a little bit of cash on the idea that just about all of those things are going to ping at least one of these categories of what we call transferable skills. And those are real capabilities that make you valuable in all kinds of different settings. And so we want to get some of the credit for that. There's meaning in that, and we want to get that on the page so that the reader can understand it. And again, I'll talk more about that as we go. Again, like I said, there are verbs and there are verbs. And so we want to be less concerned with sort of like describing a physical activity or describing something in a vague fashion. We want to use more descriptive, more active verbs that demonstrate a capability. And again, if it helps to filter through those categories of, well, what is it that I'm trying to demonstrate, right? Like attended, which I see a lot of people bring in resumes and they'll say that they attended or that they participated or that they learned. And the question is like, well, okay, what capability are you demonstrating there? That you can show up to a place or that you can like be in a room with other people? So we want to think about verbs that are a little more active and a little bit more specific. And I have placed here on the screen, this is just half of one of the pages, again, in our resume guide, which has some sample verbs that you can use to get your thought process, your writing thought process started. They are not magical. Using these verbs will not guarantee you a job. But these are thought starters that you can use to get yourself thinking in more descriptive, intentional ways about describing your capabilities from your experiences. Okay. The other piece I mentioned a few minutes ago, where possible, we want to be qualifying and quantifying to help demonstrate for the reader something about scale and complexity. This is when people talk about having numbers on your resume. And I think a lot of times we sort of just overinterpret that and we get freaked out that we need to have these big numbers and we need to like show that we increase sales by this much or we, whatever, reduce waste by that much. That's not necessarily the issue. The issue is, if you were a TA, it's one thing to say I facilitated instruction for undergraduate students. It's another thing to say I facilitated instruction for sections of 3 sections of 20 students 3 times a week. So with taking up very little space but incorporating those numbers, those metrics, now we're painting a much more vivid and complex picture of what we were dealing with. So of course, any honors or awards that were part of your experiences, not just the academic ones, those should be something that we want to address on the resume as well. So just to drive this point home, here are some examples of, back it up for a second. You know, a lot of times I will see bullet points on a resume, like when I say a lot of times, I mean like at least once a week, where a bullet point will say something like responsible for. And so not only is that not a verb, but also, you know, in my mind as a reader, responsible for is like a way of saying, here's some things I was supposed to do, right? So it doesn't help someone understand what you actually did. It's just kind of like, well, here's kind of what was going on, or what they say I was supposed to be doing. So a lot of times, you know, folks will take that kind of feedback and say, ooh, well, what if I manage teaching assistant duties? That sounds very authoritative, right? Managed. It is more active. It has a more active voice. It's still not terribly descriptive, right? And even taught, right? So I have a lot of folks that bring me resumes that say they taught, or they, you know, they tutored. It's vague, right? Is it really just a one-step process to teach or to tutor somebody? So we want to really think about, what is this verb, what is this phrase demonstrating about my capability? And so a different version of that could be tracked and evaluated, right? Tracked and evaluated student work product. So, you know, you're grading, right? Facilitated class lectures and contributed to syllabus revision process. Now, again, I've kind of compacted those three pieces into one bullet just for the sake of the presentation here. But you know, it's worth thinking about how you might be able to get these hidden pieces pulled out of these sort of simplified ways that we tend to think about these engagements that we've had as part of our academic work. And again, you know, you could pull that apart and start adding some of those metrics in to, again, demonstrate more about the scale and complexity of the engagement. So some other examples of rather meh bullet points that I've seen: run research procedures, there's that participate in meetings. Great, you were there. Manage data from procedures, right? So, you know, again, like these, I mean, yeah, like we could say technically that describes what we were supposed to do, we were responsible for. But how does it really demonstrate something about our capabilities? So some nicer versions, some more useful versions, could be train and supervise 5 undergraduate team members, right? So again, we get that scale and complexity. We're talking about training them, right? Versus managed or something vague like that. Oversaw, like, you know, these are very vague. So acclimate participants to procedures. So instead of running research procedures, which again, for somebody who maybe hasn't done that, they don't know what that means. So we want to break it down and make it a little bit clearer, so that reader can imagine what is involved. And so we could talk about acclimating participants to procedures. And again, if there are metrics available to you there, you might talk about how much of that you needed to do. Record and perform requested analyses, right? So that's more specific than talking about managing data. And, you know, and then even some of these things that we sometimes think of as kind of marginal to our experience, or they feel like they weren't the main focus of the work, it still demonstrates, again, these transferable capabilities, you know, ensuring proper lab equipment setup and storage, or inventorying, you know, again, equipment or consumables or things like that. That can refer also to, you know, if you've had jobs in retail and hospitality. I mean, all of these kinds of things where you have to pay attention to how much there is and what you have to do when it needs to be replaced. I mean, that is problem solving, that is organization. There's communication there too, right? If you have to coordinate with other people to make those things happen, they have value in professional environments, and you should get that value out of your experiences by choosing verbs and building bullet points that are going to demonstrate those things. All right. So again, just to kind of break this down a little bit further, there are some common academic activities that have transferable components, transferable capability components. So, if I say, I mean, I've covered this a little bit so far, the teaching and lab work, but I'm wondering if I'm also putting in ideas like your actual academic work, dissertation, thesis, capstone. What are some components of that you feel like you might be able to talk about in terms of demonstrating a transferable skill? Anyone have any thoughts or ideas? Any brave souls? All right, I will. Oh, Danny, are you going to chime in?
Yeah, I can, if you can hear me. Okay. Well, I guess, I mean, one thing, it depends, like say, if you're doing like a research component where you have to interview people, right? So then you can do something like that, sort of finding people to interview and then conducting the interviews, maybe even making the questionnaires, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, a great example. Thank you very much for your bravery. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I mean, we could be talking about recruiting participants. We could be talking about marketing, creating marketing collateral if that's part of that process. And we could be talking about developing those scripts, right? There's lots of components that go into that bit of research, which, is again, a lot of times we sort of just push past that in our mind because it wasn't the focus of the research, it was the process. But the capabilities that you had to develop or refine in doing all of those things are actual transferable capabilities that have value in all kinds of professional environments. And we want to really get the cred that we deserve for all of that hard work. And again, just to again put a really fine point on things, the reader of your resume may or may not be able to infer all of those things if you say I interviewed 50 people. So don't leave it up to chance. Get it right in their face, get it right in their mind. Break it down in these ways. Another thought that comes to mind when I've talked to people about their academic work, if it is generating, and then performing a literature review, right? So, I mean, you are identifying all of these works, and then you are not just reading them, but synthesizing them, right? So again, you can even go get down to that much detail. So we really want to start to think about not just end results or not just sort of the title of the academic aspects that we've been involved in, but also like really what are the capabilities, what are the things that you had to worry about to make it happen? And again, I tell people all the time, we can apply the same thought logic or the same logic to thinking about internships, jobs that you've had, the stuff that you had to care about, the stuff that you had to worry about whenever you showed up or you were working on it. There's something important about that. Otherwise, you wouldn't have to worry about it, right? And so there's probably a capability that's useful to demonstrate coming out of it. All right. So again, ooh, yikes. Let me go back. That's the thing with I love Prezi visually, and I know that it's a little bit past its prime at this point. But the trick is if you tap and then you get off kilter, there we go. Okay. So again, I'll hit it one more time. Don't forget to think about additional sources of transferable capabilities as well. So volunteering, internships, jobs, etc. So you may be saying, what about references? Haven't been talking about references yet. Don't I need to say that they're available upon request? You do not. Make a separate document, structure it the same way that you're structuring your resume, put the address blocks on that document. If they want it, they'll ask you for it, they'll know. that it's available. Chrislyn, you have a question?
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
I can.
Hi, yes, I asked a question, it looks as though Tatum had a similar question. So when you were giving an example about skills related to like dissertating, lab work sort of thing, when that skill isn't necessarily connected to a specific position that you have other than being a student, like where do you list those sorts of skills, or how do you demonstrate that on a resume when we have those skills, but it's not necessarily attached to a position per se?
Great question. Great question. Yeah. So I think, if you've got some, if thinking through this, you're saying to yourself, okay, I have a couple of bullet points at least that I can connect to that specific academic work. Capstone project, dissertation, whatever, thesis. Here's how I would do it. In your experience section, again, appropriately titled section, however you want to break it up. I would structure it as though it was a position. And maybe your role, your job title for that position is master's candidate or doctoral candidate. And then I would create these bullet points. So I would, it's almost like it's just sort of a genre exercise of turning being an academic into the format of having a position. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, absolutely. Cool. All right. So again, do not need to, I'll get back to the references, do not need to waste space on the resume itself unless there have been explicit instructions that they should be like on the same document with your other information. Make a separate document. You don't even have to waste the space to say it's available. They'll assume that you will share the information if they ask for it. Okay. All right, cool. So just a quick word before we talk briefly about cover letters, do an overview on cover letters. I just want to do some quick pieces just when you're wrapping up your writing process. Number one, for the writers out there, we know that good writing is rewriting. So like the woman in the cartoon says, we are judged not on race, creed, or color, hopefully, or gender, but grammar, punctuation, sentence structure, etc. So triple check your documents. I'm going to make a suggestion here if you haven't heard this one before. I'll check the chat in just a second. I think that this is an excellent process. Try reading your documents out loud, slowly to yourself, as though you were hearing them spoken or in a conversation. You will be amazed at the things that you find. But do that before you send important documents to somebody that you're hoping is going to hire you. All right. Let me go back to the chat really quickly here. What position would you list for dissertation work? I mean, I think I'm gonna say broadly, and this is for Tatum's question. I think this has really got to be how would you feel comfortable identifying yourself to say your academic advisors, your faculty advisors. And if you're not sure, I would probably ask them how they would feel comfortable acknowledging that you worked for them, or that what your role in the department was. Does that help? Okay, cool. All right. Ooh, what a message. All right. You got Tatum, no problem. Okay. As I said, resume guide available on the website. There's also on that same page on the website that we have the resume guide. We have now some packets of sample job descriptions, and then cover letters and resumes all kind of woven together so you can see the interrelation. So there's a few different examples for graduate students on there. Here's the spoiler. It's not for every single discipline. There isn't a sample for every single discipline, but the thought process is the same no matter what discipline you've been studying or what kind of job you're applying for. The structure, the thought, the logic behind what we're talking about today is the same across the board. So You can check out those samples at your leisure. But I'm going to talk really quickly about cover letters because I often find that this is something that gives folks even more heartburn than resumes. So I want to talk about some of our perspectives on best practice and again, the thought process that goes into creating an effective one. So what is the point? Well, of course, it makes a good first impression. Hopefully it entices the reader to continue on to read more about you in your resume. It sort of creates a certain focus for that reader as they look at your resume. Finally, because I'm a Google image search junkie, so I'm taking you all on that journey. Got some far side lab dudes here talking about confirmation bias. And in this case, what we're trying to do with the cover letter is create confirmation bias. We're kind of saying to the reader, hey, reader, in a minute, you're going to read my resume. Based on what I saw in your job description, I want you to know these are some of the most important things to pay attention to when you look at my resume. So now when the reader goes to look at the resume, they've got this idea like, oh yes, this person is exactly who I'm looking for. They described that to me in the cover letter. So now we're going to break down how we make that happen. Okay. I like to talk about, and in our cover letter guide online, you will see a 3-paragraph model. Some people like to do 4. Some people, for some reason, like to do 5. I think it's a bit excessive and complicated for the purpose. So I think 3 is a nice, simple fairy tale number, and I think it works best. So I'm going to do 3 paragraphs. If you want to do more, that's on you. But this is what we recommend. Again, really keeping in mind that unlike maybe academic readers who might be interested in combing, with great detail through your 20-page CV, this thing should be less than a page for sure. Let's not have them thinking about lunch before they even get to your resume, right? So this needs to be to the point. And so here's how we're going to do it. So the first paragraph is going to be your intro, stating the position that you are interested in, how you became aware of it. I was excited to learn of your blank role on LinkedIn or something like that. Use the official position title from the posting if you're working from a job description. If you have a name to drop, in other words, someone who you have been networking with, who is familiar, who would be familiar to the reader, this is a good place to do it in this introductory paragraph. So you're going to be introducing yourself and providing some context. Again, your current professional status. I am currently completing. I am currently working with. Some variation on that. So something about your current status. Expressing your interest and enthusiasm for the position, the organization, the clients, the mission. We want to be genuine here. We want to be genuine and say something real. If it feels like you're making something up that's fake to say, absolutely the reader is going to, they're going to feel that fakeness. So think about the position, the role, the nature of the role, the organization itself, the clients that are served. Figure out what you connect with, right? There's a bunch of jobs and internships you're not applying for. So why this one, right? Connect with something real and lay it out in that introduction, okay? All right, so the second paragraph, this is the hard part for most folks, I have found. And this is where we're trying to make some very tangible connections between what's most relevant on your resume and how that connects back to what the employer has said they want from their job description. Okay, so we'll break that down a little bit. So number one is to, do an analytical read on that job description. So analyze the job description, maybe research the organization via other online means, maybe take into consideration information that you've gathered via networking as well. So determine the needs and wants of the organization using those methodologies. And now you might start grouping the employer's needs into categories. And so these might be technical skills and qualifications that they're asking for. They might also be some of those transferable skill categories. In fact, most job descriptions are going to involve an awful lot of those transferable skill categories that we were talking about before. So start to group those statements that the employer has made in the description into those categories. Now you're going to start thinking about how stuff in your background, how different aspects of your experiences, and again, thinking about experiences very broadly, how does it connect with those different buckets, right? How can you start to group your experiences, aspects and components of what you've been doing into ways that connect to those buckets of what the employer wants or needs? So here are some sample phrases, ways you can do this. Because really, we're going to zoom out a bit for the cover letter. We're not going to walk through every experience you've had and talk about it chronologically or something like that. We're going to zoom out a bit and talk about it at a broad level, and make these kinds of connections. So again, here's some sample phrases you can use. They're not magic words. They don't guarantee success, but I think that they're useful in terms of conceptualizing. So for example, my assistantship experiences with so-and-so and so-and-so allowed me to develop leadership and project planning skills. So you're alluding to an item that they're gonna find on your resume, and you're saying how it ties back to something that they mentioned that they want in that job description. So another way, again, beyond my blank coursework, my experience with whatever, allowed me to develop my capabilities in, again, one of the things that they have asked for is what's going to go into that third blank there. So in my research on or with, I collaborated constantly. So again, there's different ways that we can connect and package and group together our experiences broadly. We don't have to walk through the resume point by point in paragraph form. We can make these broad connections. The point is to tie them back very tangibly, cohesively to things that the employer has said that they need done. Okay. There's one more bubble for this section. Yeah. So just some best practices, just even in thinking about this middle paragraph, because I think this really is the part that's hard for a lot of folks. So we want to make strategic connections. Again, we're not just walking through the whole resume. We're not just talking about everything that makes us a special unicorn. We want to make strategic connections to what they want. We want to use a coherent conversational structure. Again, I suggest go outside, go for a walk, come back in, read it out loud to yourself slowly and intentionally. Does it make sense? If somebody said this to you in a conversation, would it make sense? Would it be addressing the needs stated in the description? And again, consider your experiences very broadly. As long as the person's going to be able to find some representation on your resume, then you can use it here. You can refer to it here. Okay. All right, don't worry. I know we're getting close on time, y'all, but we're almost there. Because the third paragraph is really boilerplate stuff. We're just wrapping up next steps, appreciating the reader. So restating interest, summarizing what you have to offer. You can put your contact information, email and phone right there in the paragraph. And then of course, thanking the reader for their time and consideration. So, and there again, we will have the link to the resume guide in particular online. But this is really the strategy that we feel is most impactful for the resume, for the cover letter, and linking the resume back to the job description with that document. Again, if you feel like 4 paragraphs is the way that makes sense to you, or 5 or whatever, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna arm wrestle about it. I think 3 covers the bases and keeps it simple and straight ahead. But at this point, I will open the floor and see if folks have other questions, thoughts, concerns for authoring either of these documents. Yeah, buts. That's not what my aunt who works in HR told me. Frank, do you have a thought?
No, I would just like to say thank you for the presentation. It was awesome. And it was a bit different and to the point. I would like just to have the same information if you can send it to our emails so that we can get it, and also the recording to review it slowly and to go over it again. I think repetition is very ignition, and it helps one to integrate and keep it in memory. because there's things that one can take for granted, but they really matter. Thanks for the presentation. Anyway,
Thank
it was
you, Frank.
awesome.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
We
Very
will
well
work,
said about
very
repetition.
incisive.
Oh.
Yeah.
we'll work to send the presentation notes or recording to all attendees. So I just wanted to let you guys know that.
Thank you.
Not at all. Other questions, thoughts, concerns?
I have a quick question. So like you said, transferable skills with research. Is there like ways in the cover letter to sort of explain your transferable skills and like ways that can kind of like make sense to maybe someone who doesn't fully have like a, you know, like PhD background or something, or they didn't exactly study what you studied. So making it like understandable to them, but also not like selling yourself short on the things that you did, I guess.
Well, I think the answer is yes, with an asterisk. And so what I'd say is this. On the cover letter in particular, I mean, I think that's a great question to be asking even on the resume, right? Like, how am I going to break down in language that's not purely academic, right? What my capabilities here are. On the cover letter, you really want to be thinking about, what am I trying to respond to in that job description? And what aspects of my experience, of my transferable capabilities can speak to that? So that's going to really help actually guide you to find language, because you're going to be looking for those aspects of your academic experience that speak to what they have said they want. Because here's the thing, on the cover letter, you don't need to be explaining other things to them than that. I mean, I hear what you're saying, you know, you want to get across all of the, you know, other things that may be useful. And again, on the resume, you're going to do that with a finer grain or in greater detail in different ways. But on the cover letter, the point is really to be tying back capabilities that you have to what they say they need done. So if you can find language to connect those things, then that provides that language for you, right? What they say they've done. If it's not something that they've said that they're really worried about or concerned about, then you don't need to be talking about it on the cover letter. All right. Any other questions?
One last one from me.
Sure.
You find that, from the point of experience, I have a lot, and you might be, when I apply for a position, a specific position, they might not need the experience that I have from another different line. And so I operate from the CV point of view, which is very bulky, and trying even to limit it is a problem. How do you limit to a specific job and leave out maybe some skills that are very important, but you need to be brief and to the point and to the specific job that you are asked about? I find that to be a real issue on my side.
Okay. So yeah, and you know, this challenge is real. And one of the things with resumes is that it's perfectly acceptable, for one thing, to look at it as not one document that does everything for you. You can, if you're looking at different kinds of positions, different kinds of roles, that's for different kinds of skill sets, you can create different kinds of resumes that tailor to those roles. And, you know, again, sort of depending on what is in your portfolio, what your history has been, if you fill up 2 pages just talking with super relevant stuff, then you can stop there. You know, if you've got less than that, and you know, on the very focused relevant experience, but you do have additional experiences which speak to some of those transferable skills, then I would add the more robust or recent versions of that. So that's kind of the basic ways that I would curate. And I think that's the way I might talk about this process is we're curating versions of ourselves based on what they've said they want. And it's okay that it's not everything that you've ever done. You know, we're working with the reader in mind. All right. Well, I want to be mindful of everybody's time. I appreciate y'all coming out to Zoom in the middle of a sunny day where it's so nice outside. I appreciate you being here. I want you to know, again, we do have resources that are online. We do have resources that are human. So you can come and meet with a career advisor if you want to talk more specifically about your resume, your cover letters, and your job search. Those are all pieces that we're happy to connect with you on individually and you know, work through your particular situation. You can make appointments with us on Handshake. You can also contact our main desk if you like that better, and they can help you do that part. But I want you to know that we're here to help on an ongoing basis. And I'll turn it back over to Jessica if you have any other closing thoughts you'd like to say.
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you, everyone, for attending. And if you have any questions for the graduate school, you can always reach out to me, and any programming ideas that you would like to see, you can always contact me about that. So thank you.
All right, everyone, have a great afternoon.